Snow crunches under weary boots. Eric Lenz, 23, staggers forward with a column of defeated German POWs, his uniform torn and muddied. Exhaustion pulls at every limb, and his mind braces for the humiliation that has been drilled into him since capture. He expects shouted orders in broken English, sneers, or the cold alien authority of foreign soldiers. Then a voice cuts through the white haze, precise, smooth, unmistakably Bavarian. "Setz dich, Captain." Eric freezes. Confusion floods him. This is not broken, stammered English. It's his mother tongue, spoken by one of the Americans. Shock ripples through the line. Men whisper, doubt flickering in their eyes. Could this be real? The enemy, who was supposed to be a barbarian invader, suddenly speaks like home? Every command, every subtle joke in dialect strikes at a nerve, both comforting and terrifying. Eric glances at the soldier, taking in the uniform, the olive drab, the stars and stripes, and yet the cadence of home flows from his lips. The prisoners are disarmed, not by weapons, but by words. Each syllable cuts deeper than the cold wind, a psychological weapon crafted years before the war, ready to shatter pride and instill both awe and fear. For Eric and the men beside him, the war begins not with rifles or fists, but with the eerie familiarity of their own language echoing through the foreign camp. Every thought of escape, every whispered plan suddenly feels fragile. They are prisoners, yes, but now prisoners in a world that speaks their own voice back to them. The prisoners, still trembling from the shock of hearing their mother tongue, realize that their training to distrust everyone is now tested like never before. Orders continue in flawless German, punctuated with slang and regional nuances. Every whisper and plan they try to conceal is immediately understood, disarming even the most defiant officers. Behind the scenes, America's preparation becomes clear. Long before the war, German-speaking immigrants, Jewish refugees, and political dissidents were trained by the Military Intelligence Service, or MIS. They learned not just military tactics, but the subtleties of language, dialects, slang, humor, and cultural references. The U.S. understood that words could destabilize an enemy just as effectively as bullets. Eric watches as his comrades whisper among themselves, suspicion and fear twisting their faces. Are these Americans or Germans who betrayed their homeland? A sergeant murmurs. The question hangs in the cold air, unanswerable, gnawing at loyalty and identity. Even small attempts at defiance are intercepted. A private mutters a coded message about a food shortage. An American guard replies in the same local dialect, subtly correcting grammar while dissolving the prisoner's confidence. The psychological grip tightens. Every command, every joke, every line of familiar speech becomes a weapon. Eric begins to feel the boundaries of control shift. This is no ordinary captivity. It is a battle for the mind, a silent war waged in syllables and accent, testing the prisoner's resolve and shaking their understanding of friend and foe. Days pass, and the prisoners grow restless. Attempts to resist, to communicate secretly, or to plan escape repeatedly fail. Every whisper is met with swift comprehension. Every gesture, no matter how subtle, is interpreted and neutralized by guards who know the prisoner's language as intimately as their own. Eric sees a fellow soldier, Hans, try to rally a small group to revolt over the food rations. Within minutes, seconds, a German-born American guard appears, speaking in the exact regional dialect Hans grew up with, calmly dismantling the plan with a mix of humor and authority. The frustration is palpable. Pride and training crumble under the relentless psychological assault. Tension intensifies as the prisoners start to question their own perception. Small acts of kindness, a cigarette offered in the camp yard, or a joke about a hometown bakery, create doubt. Is it manipulation or genuine humanity? The prisoner's morale becomes a maze of suspicion and fear. Eric feels the strain on his mind. Each day the line between friend and foe blurs further. The guard's fluent German, once comforting, now serves as a constant reminder that privacy, loyalty, and control are illusions. Sleep is restless. Conversations are cautious, and trust is nearly impossible. Every action, every word is now a test of wit and patience, and failure is immediate and unavoidable. As the days stretch into weeks, the silent war deepens. The prisoners are trapped in more than barbed wire. They are trapped in a web of language, culture, and psychological dominance. For Eric, the battle is no longer against the Americans alone. It is against the destabilization of his own mind. Eric has reached the edge of his endurance. The constant vigilance, the constant decoding of subtle cues has worn him thin. One evening, during roll call, an unexpected voice speaks. Not the commanding tone of a guard, but the familiar cadence of a fellow German-born American soldier telling a story from his childhood village in Hamburg. The prisoners are stunned. Memories of home flood back in vivid detail. The smell of fresh bread, the laughter of siblings, the echo of church bells. Eric feels something shift inside him, a mix of vulnerability and clarity. The guards are no longer just authority figures. They are reminders of the world that once existed, and the fragile line between ally and captor becomes painfully apparent. In a rare moment of honesty, the guards share a cultural reference, a folk song, and a joke only someone from the prisoners' own towns would understand. Laughter, hesitant at first, spreads. A crack appears in the wall of fear. The psychological hold that had seemed insurmountable wavers. Eric realizes that the American strategy was never solely about control. It was about understanding, about using language to mirror identity, forcing introspection, and testing loyalties. This breakthrough is the turning point. Prisoners who had been tense and defiant began to interact differently, cautiously, but with a growing recognition of the shared humanity across the barbed wire. The atmosphere of the camp changes subtly. Where silence and fear once ruled, small conversations, exchange stories, and moments of levity begin to emerge. Eric finally comprehends the paradox. The enemy has used their own language, their own culture to disarm them, not through violence, but through empathy, cunning, and the power of words. Weeks turn into months, and life within the camp stabilizes. The initial fear and tension begin to give way to a cautious equilibrium. Eric and his fellow prisoners have learned the limits of defiance and the subtle power of communication. The guards, fluent in their language, continue to maintain order, but now the prisoners see their efforts as more than just control. They are gestures of guidance and structure. Education programs, cultural activities, and small freedoms allowed by the camp administration create an environment that feels strangely human. German-speaking guards lead classes, organize theater performances, and facilitate discussions, transforming the camp into a society with rules, culture, and a fragile sense of community. Eric reflects on the paradox. The same language that once disarmed and humiliated him now provides comfort and connection. The psychological battle has reshaped relationships, loyalty, and trust. Some prisoners begin to respect and even admire the guards, understanding that their heritage and exile drove them to fight the tyranny that the prisoners once served. Letters and communication are still monitored, but the experience teaches Eric and the others a hard lesson about identity, power, and the ethics of psychological strategy. They leave behind the rigid hierarchies and propaganda-driven mindset they once held, realizing that warfare can be fought not only with weapons, but with intellect, empathy, and understanding. The war ends, and Eric prepares to leave the camp, carrying memories heavier than any pack. The barbed wire that once confined him now seems almost irrelevant compared to the invisible threads of language, culture, and human connection that shaped his captivity. The voices of the German-speaking American guards linger in his mind, familiar, haunting, and transformative. As trains depart, prisoners glance back at the camp, reflecting on the paradox of their experience. The enemy that had once seemed faceless, barbaric, and incomprehensible had shown them a strange form of humanity. Eric realizes that language, culture, and empathy can be as powerful as any weapon, bridging divides and leaving lasting impressions long after bullets and bombs have faded. Some prisoners carry bitterness, feeling the sting of manipulation and control. Others hold gratitude for the rare humanity and understanding they encountered. Eric walks toward an uncertain future, aware that his perceptions of loyalty, identity, and morality have been forever altered. Would you remember the barbed wire, or the voices that spoke your language on the other side? It is a reflection not just on war, but on the complexity of human connection, the power of words, and the enduring influence of empathy even in the darkest of times.